After Dark Stories, Episode 8. Script 1. True Crime. The Villisca Axe Murders. On the morning of June 10th, 1912, a neighbor walked to the Moore House on East 2nd Street in Villisca, Iowa, and knocked on the door. No one answered. She tried the handle. Locked. She peered through a window. The curtains were drawn. She went for help. What they found inside that house would haunt the town of Villisca for the next 100 years, and has never, to this day, been explained. Welcome to After Dark Stories. Tonight, the Villisca Axe Murders. Sunday, June 9th, 1912. It was Children's Day at the Presbyterian Church, a summer program full of music and recitals. Josiah Moore was there with his wife Sarah and their 4 children, Herman, Mary Catherine, Arthur, and Paul. 2 of the children's friends, sisters Lena and Ina Stillinger, were sleeping over that night. 8 people settled into that house after dark. None of them would see morning. The attack happened in the small hours, sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. All 8 victims were killed in their beds with an axe belonging to Josiah Moore. They were struck repeatedly, each one bludgeoned beyond recognition. Investigators noted the killer had covered the mirrors and windows from the inside after the murders. They found a bowl of bloody water in the kitchen, as if someone had washed up. A piece of raw bacon was left near the murder weapon. Cigar butts were scattered across the floor. The door was locked when authorities arrived. The killer had vanished into the Iowa night. The youngest victim was 5 years old. Investigators were quickly overwhelmed. There had been a series of similar axe murders across the Midwest, Colorado, Illinois, Kansas, all in the preceding 10 months. Some believed they were looking for a traveling killer, someone moving from town to town. Others believed the answer was closer to home. Suspicion quickly fell on Frank F. Jones, a wealthy Iowa state senator and former employer of Josiah Moore. The theory was that Jones, furious over a business dispute, had hired a man named William Mansfield to commit the murders. A private detective spent years building a case against Jones. It ultimately collapsed when Mansfield produced a solid alibi. But there was another suspect, a stranger in town that night, a traveling preacher named Reverend George Kelly. Kelly was a small man, 5'2", barely 120 pounds. He'd come to Villisca to attend the Children's Day program, the very same event the Moore family had attended. He left on the early morning train before the bodies were discovered. In the weeks that followed, Kelly behaved strangely. He wrote obsessive letters to investigators. He claimed to have heard the thud of an axe when walking past the Moore house that night. He posed as a Scotland Yard detective to gain entry to the murder scene. 5 years later, after hours of interrogation, he confessed. He said God had spoken to him, that he had been directed to the house, that he had obeyed the biblical command to slay utterly. He then recanted the confession entirely. Kelly was tried twice. The first trial ended in a hung jury. The second ended in acquittal. His defense argued that Kelly was, in the words of his own lawyer, not just a nut, but a whole carload of nuts. His size, his mental instability, and a confession extracted through coercion were all enough to create doubt. He returned to preaching and reportedly died in a Long Island psychiatric hospital in the 1950s. No one else was ever charged. The Moore House still stands in Villisca, Iowa. The Plenting Moore House would be unmarked to Villisca. The Moore House, still Philly, died with focused. The not words to people of 10 because the Moore House was quite. The Morehouse, still Philly, died with Balut. The Morehouse still stands in Villisca, but first devise is an other oleus delay. The Morehouse still stands in Villisca because the unspace would should know. The Morehouse still stands in the Morehouse because the Morehouse was will. The Morehouse still set, the nut was de derm. The Morehouse still stands in Villisca and returned to another top. The Morehouse still see them because the Morehouse settle the nuff the derm. The Morehouse still stead, that died with focused de Villisca. The Morehouse still stead died with Villiot. They brought to pressing in Villisca, Iowa. You can visit it. You can even spend the night. People do.